Hello, everybody. Welcome to tonight's Zoom webinar. We are going to be covering the key aspects of night flying. We're super happy to have you here with us at Princeton Flying School. We've got our two CFIs, Joe and Andrew, that will be presenting. So before I hand it over to them, if you ever have any topics or ideas for webinars, feel free to email us, call us, just let us know, because that definitely helps us on our side make these webinars more useful for you as the students and the pilots at the Princeton Flying School. All right, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Joe and Andrew. All right.
All right. So I'll let you start off, Joe.
Oh, thank you. So kind.
Yes.
Welcome everybody. Tonight we are going to be discussing the key aspects of nighttime flying.
As you see behind us.
Yep, one of my favorite things to do. I love night flying. I think it's beautiful and relaxing.
Yeah, it's just nice out.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Next slide.
All right, so my name is Joe. I've been a CFI here at Princeton since 2023. I started my flight training here during my instrument training, and they just never got rid of me. 2017, I got my bachelor's in communication studies at Rowan University and had no clue what I wanted to do. So I worked in an office for a couple years and hated it. And here I am. On top of that, outside of aviation and flying, I really am into music and music production. I played a plethora of instruments back in my heyday.
Quite the musician.
Yeah. And that's all I got for you right now.
All right. I'll move on to mine. So, hi, my name is Andrew Wells. I'm a CFII at Princeton, and I've been working here since July of 2023. I have my associate's degree in aviation technology, and normally when I'm not at the airport and I'm not flying, I have a few side things I do. So I'm a volunteer firefighter, and I also, if I'm not doing that, you can find me out on the boat down Delaware River. So I'm always seeing people flying over all the time. And that's kind of where I grew my love for aviation, seeing all the planes flying over. All right, so we'll move into our introduction. So this is a little bit about what we're going to be talking tonight. So night flying in general is what we're going to be talking about. But major thing with this is a lot of people actually prefer night flying. The air is smoother, radios are quieter, and less traffic, which makes it more relaxed. Right? It's less stress on us. We don't have to deal with the radios as much. We don't have to deal. It's just easier. But with that, we have some factors dealing with nighttime operations, right? So some things we need to be aware about, and we're going to discuss that tonight to show you how to become a safer and better overall pilot. So with that, what eyes function differently, visual references are different, all presenting unique situations which, if ignored, can lead to dangerous situations.
Right, and part of this webinar is going to be focusing on how to mitigate situations, dangerous situations, before they become dangerous situations.
Yes. So we want to teach you how to know when you could be possibly experiencing these and how to mitigate them and make sure that you're flying safe. Here is the number one thing that people struggle with in their flight training. I know I see it. I know you see it. Even we struggle with it. We were making this webinar like, wait, is that it? Is this it? Because the FAA makes it a little bit confusing. We're trying to simplify it down for you to understand it a little better. So if we look at this picture right here, we can see a few blocks. The first thing we're going to talk about is sunset to sunrise. You can find this when you go on your iPhone. You can see, okay, this is sunset. You can look up online. You can see what time sunset is. Once sunset reaches, we need to have night equipment and our lights on for nighttime. So we need to have those positioning lights on, which we're going to talk a little bit later on in the slides. We need to have those on. So from sunset to sunrise, we need to have those. Then at the end of civil twilight is when we can log the time for night. This does not mean we can log the landings for currency. We can only log the time. For a rough estimate, it's about 30 minutes after sunset. Ideally, the FAA says there's like 6 degrees geometric, but for a general rule of thumb, it's about 30 minutes after sunset. So around 30 minutes after, we can start logging that time for hours. Then we move into 1 hour after sunset. And this is when we can log takeoffs and landings for currency. So in order to carry passengers, we need to be current. So we need our 3 takeoffs within the preceding 90 days of flying with passengers. So if I need to fly passengers during the night, within the preceding 90 days, I need to have 3 takeoffs and landings to full stop within those 90 days. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. But they have to be 1 hour after sunset.
Yeah.
And we can log them for currency.
So basically, civil twilight might still have a little bit of sunshine coming in. FAA wants it to be completely dark when you log those currency landings because they want to make sure you're going to be good in nighttime conditions, like actual dark.
Right, because during 1 hour after sunset, it's right at the edge where the sun's a glowing orange and it's still up. So we want to make sure you know when you can log. So at sunset, just make sure your lights are on. After roughly half an hour after sunset, we can start to log the hour time. So whether it's that be for your private pilot certificate, anything you need to log nighttime for. But then after 1 hour after sunset, we can log the landings for our currency. All right,
cool.
So with this, we have our pre-flight inspection, and those positioning lights are going to be something I'm going to be talking about like I did before. So for nighttime, we obviously need to have our tomato flames for your daytime VFR instruments, but now we also add an additional flaps. So it's an acronym we use for nighttime. So tomato flames plus flaps. So the first thing we're going to need is fuses. You need at least 1 complete set for this, but if you look at our planes at Princeton, we don't have fuses in them. So we have a different set of them. Essentially, is we have circuit breakers. So instead of us trying to replace a whole fuse, we can just pop a circuit breaker back in, and that could fix the problem instead of trying to replace it with the whole fuse. So we have circuit breakers, so we don't need to have fuses on us. The next thing is going to be our landing light. We need this only if we are for hire. So what this means is if, let's say, Joe owns his own plane and he wants to go flying at night, but he's doing this pre-flight and now the landing light's out, can he still go fly? The answer is yes, because it's his own plane. He's not for hire. He's not making any money or doing anything. Bummer. So, yeah. So essentially, he can still go fly. But now, if I'm a student, Joe's CFI, and we're going out to our plane here, and we're looking at the aircraft, and we see our landing lights out, are we legal to go fly? Nope. So we aren't, because since it's a flight school and you're paying for the aircraft, it's for hire, we legally cannot go fly without the landing light. So if you own your own plane, you can go ahead, go up. But if it's renting or flight instructing, anything like that, we're not able to. After that comes our anti-collision lights. And this is going to be your beacon, your strobe lights. We need to make sure that these are operational and working. The main one is going to be your beacon on the back on our Cessna 172. Then we also have our positioning lights. This is going to be what they also call nav lights. It's your red and green lights.
We got a little slide on that later, Joe.
Mm-hmm. And Joe's got a good one with good pictures later.
Best one.
We'll talk about that a little bit later. So that's just the red and green lights. We need to have that on. And the last thing we need is our source of electricity. So whether it be an alternator, it be a generator. In our 172s, we have our alternator, and that essentially supplies everything with the power. Our lights, our avionics, everything we need to fly during night. Because without a source of power, pretty much all the stuff on this list we wouldn't have. So we want to make sure we have sources of electricity to support it all. Now we're going to go into a little bit about when you plan your flight, where you're going and how to find like landmarks around it, things to be aware about. So the first thing on our sectional is going to be our yellow areas. And essentially, right, these are more densely populated areas. There's going to be a lot more buildings, a lot more lights going on. So it's going to be more densely populated and much easier to see.
Not to cut you off, but I think you actually have a snippet of that.
Yes,
slide.
On the next slide. Yep. We'll go to that. I'll show you a little bit in the next slide. But that yellow is going to be a much more densely populated area, and we'll be able to see that from further away with all those lights shining. The second thing we want to look out for is towers. Some are lighted and some are not. So we need to be aware of this. So here we have a key for the sectionals, whether to tell if an obstruction or tower is lighted or if it is not lighted. So if we look on the left where it says high intensity obstruction lights, this means that there's a light on the top of it and we can see it better at night. But now if we look at the right, there's no flashing or glowing on the top. So this means it possibly doesn't have a light. So we need to be aware of this, especially if you have some tall towers. I know there's one off of 295. When you take off, if you're flying down
The lighted tower?
yeah, that one's lighted.
Yeah.
But there's a tall one there, right? We want to be aware of that. It can be used as one of your points to at night, so you know where you're at. Okay, I know I'm near this tower, but we need to be aware of where this is at because it could be a hazard to us flying at nighttime, especially the ones that are not lighted. That could be a huge hazard. The third thing is when we plan our flight on our sectional, we want to use a big marker or a pen, preferably not red. The reason being is when we use the red lights inside of the plane, that helps our night vision. And if we have a red light, we're not going to be able to see that red pen, right? The pen's red. You're not going to be able to see it on the sectional because the red light's going to drown it out essentially. So we want to make sure we have used bigger markers, maybe thicker pens or anything like that if you're writing anything on sectional or even any piece of paper. The fourth thing is study your flight path for all navigation aids, whether it be airports, even if it's closed airports. Always be prepared and know where you're at. You always want to know where you're at, especially at night, because if we talk about night emergencies later, we want to know, okay, here's a field here. Even if this field is closed, I have a plan and I know what to do in case anything occurs during our flight flying at night. Here's some of the pictures. So if we look here at this left picture, if you see
Joe
my
and Andrew,
mouse.
there's some questions in the chat. Just be aware.
Oh, gotcha. I guess so for some of these, so a rental from Princeton, right? You still need it because you're still paying to rent the plane. It's still a plane for hire. So you still have to have it unless you solely own the plane and just say, I'm taking it up and going flying. So at Princeton, even if you're just renting it, you still need it. All right. So when we look here, we can see this is part of the yellow, and this is actually right down near, if you guys know where Bordentown is, or Trenton's a little bit right up here, airport. And so right here is the river, but we also see Trenton is a bright yellow area. Trenton is very lit up at night, right? It's a populated city. So if I'm flying, whether that be to Trenton Airport or even Princeton, I can see far away and say that's Trenton. I know I have to fly to this point, and that'll ideally take me there. So we want to be aware for these yellow areas densely populated. Another thing on here is our river. It creates some illusions, which we're going to talk about like a little later in the slide. And this could create like a black hole or featureless terrain illusion. And essentially, there's no lights around. So it trails you in. It looks like there's nothing there, and it gives you, we said, an illusion, which we'll talk about later. Same thing with down near Atlantic City. This is a giant marsh area. So we're not going to see many lights there. It's going to create a few more illusions. It almost looks like you see Atlantic City right in front of you. And then if you look to the left, it just looks dark and like nothing's there. So the next thing we'll talk about is human factors. This is making sure that you're good. You feel well enough to fly at night. So we talk a little bit about, obviously, the I'm Safe checklist. So we want to make sure, are you sick? Do you have any symptoms? Make sure you're feeling good, especially if your nose is clogged up or anything. That can mess with your inner ear, and we don't want to mess with that, especially at night. Next thing is going to be medication. Have you taken any prescription or over-the-counter drugs or anything? Be aware of what you're taking. Make sure you're not taking anything that the FAA doesn't want you to. Next part is stress. Am I under pressure or worried about anything, whether it be at the airport or not? Right? Especially at night, you may be coming back from work and you may be stressed trying to make it to flight from work and all this. Don't be stressed. If you feel too stressed to fly, you're not going to learn much. You're going to have a harder time flying. So maybe just don't go flying at night if you're stressed, especially at night. Like I said, there's a lot more hazards and dangers at night. The other thing is alcohol. Make sure you're not drinking 8 hours bottle of throttle. We don't want to be drinking and flying. Fatigue. This is another thing, especially at nighttime, which comes up, right? So we emphasize on some of these points at night because they apply to us much, much more, because during nighttime, you're normally sleeping. So you may be tired. So if you're planning a night flight, maybe get some rest before and be prepared for your upcoming flight.
One thing I just kind of want to throw in there with the fatigue as well. Now that the days are getting shorter, I know a lot of people are going to want to do their night flights right after they just come off of an 8-hour shift. I used to do it all the time, and it was not the most fun night flights ever. With that darkness, you're going to get a little bit more tired as it is. But just coming off a shift at work and then going to fly an airplane might not be the best night for you. You might want to take an hour or two, get some coffee before you go fly the plane instead of just trying to rush over here and fly fatigued. I feel like because it gets dark early, people are like, oh, it's only 5 o'clock. I'm fine. So it's just something to be mindful of.
Yep, always be aware of that. Right, nighttime, especially fatigue applies. Then we move into emotion. Make sure you feel good to fly. You're all good. Don't want to bring any emotions into the cockpit. You want to focus on flying when you're in the plane. Cool. Right. Now we're going to talk about eyes at night. So our eyes are very different at nighttime. They use what we call rods and cones. And if we look at this picture, we can see how our rods and cones are right here. So we can see the blue are our cones and the purple is our rods. So during the daytime, we use our cones. It's pretty much my next picture, which I'm going to show on this slide, shows you it focuses in the center, and we use our cones a lot during the day. But during nighttime, our cones are a lot less useful. They don't allow us to see in the night very well. So we use our rods at nighttime, and they function more with our peripheral vision, and we use our rods at nighttime. They give us much better vision at night, and we can see a lot more. So when we do our pre-flight, we want to make sure that if we're flying soon, we use a red light, but it takes 30 minutes for those rods to readjust to the light. So we want to make sure if we're going to fly 30 minutes after our pre-flight, or if we're going to fly and we're going to fly before 30 minutes after our pre-flight, we want to make sure that we're using the red light. This way our rods are adjusted to the light, and we're ready with our night vision as we go fly.
Right, yeah. Red lights tend to be a little bit less harsh on the eyes than white light. So that's why it kind of helps with the rods adjusting to the darkness.
Yep.
More or less.
Exactly. And this is why when you're sleeping, all of a sudden someone turns on the lights, your eyes are very sensitive. Those rods are adjusting to the light because it's very bright and they're very sensitive.
Yeah. So I mean, just kind of going back into that pre-flight conversation, like usually especially like now, this time of year, if I can get to the airport a little bit earlier, do my pre-flight during the daytime while my CFIs are inside talking away. It doesn't hurt to get the pre-flight done in the daytime, then just wait a little bit for the sun to go down.
Yeah.
But you could also use a white light if you know you're going to be gone like 30 minutes or a little more. Because you're going to see more apparent with the plane. With a white light, like oil, or any sort of like liquid.
You may not see with the red light, just like you wouldn't see that red pen on the sectional. It could drown everything else out. So we just want to be careful. Sometimes use that white light, but be aware that your eyes need 30 minutes to adjust to that darkness. Right? Here's another picture. This is what I was talking about earlier. So our area of best vision during the day is right in front of us, but then at nighttime we're using those rods more, so our area is in our peripheral vision, where in the daytime we're using the cones, which are perfect for right in front of us.
Wow.
Right, so then we go into some of the illusions we're going to encounter. So this picture right here is an example of autokinesis. Right, it's when we're staring at a light for a little bit and it almost appears to move. So when you look at this kind of simulates what it's like to see, right? We see all these lights moving around. So we're looking at this light and it's moving. So how we avoid this is we avoid fixating. If we see a light way down on the horizon, if we see it far, we want to make sure we're not solely focusing on that light, like a beacon light coming into an airport, right? Because you may start to get this autokinesis and get a little bit confused of where this light is at. So we want to make sure we're constantly having a scan, not becoming fully focused on one thing or one light, sorry. Then we have our featureless terrain, and this picture is a great example. And a little bit what I talked about those rivers and that marsh. This may be what it looks like as you're coming into land, right? We have water all around, and it almost looks like the airport's floating, right? So this may occur when we're flying around water, and it allows us to have a tendency to fly a lower than normal approach. So at nighttime, we want to be aware of this, because it's always better to be a little bit higher on approach when you come into land, just to be better, safer than sorry. Here we go into false horizons. This is caused when natural horizon is obscured or not apparent. So if a mountain is blocking some lights, it may seem like your horizon is your apparent horizon, which is right here, where your actual horizon is right here. So when we're near cities with mountains or anything else, this is when we want to be aware for these false horizons, when they're going to pop up at us. And the way we counteract this is we trust your instruments. If we look at this picture right here, right, if we're looking at the apparent horizon, it looks straight. But then we look at our instruments, we can see, it's a little blurry, but you can kind of see how the plane is in a right-hand bank right now, which aligns with what our actual horizon is. So we want to trust our instruments, make sure you rely on them, because sometimes you get spatial disorientation, and we have to be aware of when we're encountering that and knowing to rely on those instruments. And we can cross-check our instruments too to make sure that they're both all agreeing with each other. So with the turn here, if the plane's in the bank, I can see my heading indicator and I can see which way we're turning. And if we're in the right bank, we're going to be turning to the right. So I can cross-verify it with our instruments. Then we move into startup and taxiing at night. So this is when we're getting ready, we're starting the plane up. We want to be aware of a few hazards with that. So number one, the first thing is leave all unnecessary electrical equipment off until after engines start, right? We have a 24-volt battery in our 172s. We want to make sure we're not draining them at night. So when we do our pre-flight, we turn on our lights. We want to do a quick walk around, but don't leave them on for too long, because if we let that battery drain, we could possibly not be able to start it because we may not have enough battery power.
Especially now it's starting to get cold out.
With the colder air, especially if you're in a carbureted aircraft, right?
Be quick with if you're going to check the lights.
Yep, because you may need that, because carburetors, obviously, take longer to start in the cold. And so we want to be aware of that. Number two is turn on your strobes when taxiing onto the runway so you don't blind others.
Just to be clear on that,
Mm-hmm.
not when taxiing around the airport.
Once you have entered the runway, then turn your strobe lights on. Don't turn them on until you have actually entered the runway. The reason being is it can blind other pilots. So if I'm sitting doing my run up near 2-8 where we pulled it aside and my plane's sideways and the plane is landing right here, right? I can be blinding them essentially with my strobe light. It could be very disorientating for them having a flashing light in their face as they're coming into land. So we want to be aware until we enter that runway, that strobe light should be off. Once we enter it, then we can turn it on just to help other pilots. And it's kind of just more common courtesy, and it also makes nighttime flying safer for everyone. Number three is going to be have an airport diagramming. When we're taxiing at bigger airports, you want to be aware of where you're at, right? We see these intersections, maybe we cross them off with an X so we know we've passed this point. And this way, if I get lost, I can say, okay, I know I'm right here. I know I'm at this point, so I need to find maybe this taxiway or that one near me, and I can kind of figure out where I'm at, right? It just gives you better overall situational awareness, because you may not know where you're going at night. And that leads us to our next point, which is going to be always, always, always follow the center lines. I've heard a few stories of people not following these center yellow lines, and they're taxiing off into the grass. They're taxiing off into an embankment or anything. So we always, always, always follow these yellow center lines. When we come into land, those yellow center lines always start at the center line of the runway onto the taxiway. So if we're confused on the runway, we just get back to that center line and we follow it until we see a yellow line off. And then we always follow that yellow line and we taxi off the runway and we still follow it coming off, because those taxiway lights may look a little different. You may cut it a little shorter. Like I said, you may end up in grass or anything else. And the last thing we're going to talk about for startup and taxiing is forward motion during the run-up may be less noticeable, right? When we're sitting on the ground during the day doing our run-up, if we're looking down, we can kind of see trees or grass or anything moving around us, and we kind of realize, oh, the plane's moving, hit the brakes. But at nighttime, it's difficult to see this because we can't see as far because it's darker out. So we want to be aware of if the plane is moving. If you're doing your run-up, make sure that emergency brake is applied. Hold the brakes. Make sure you're holding the brakes and it's not moving. It never hurts to always look up occasionally and double check. Never just keep your head down the whole time, because you could be rolling onto the runway and not even know. So we want to be aware of that.
Oh boy, it's my turn. Right. All right, so we got through the taxi phase and the run-up. So now we're ready to depart. So the first key element in doing a departure at night is going to be just beforehand knowing how your aircraft performs. Personally, I wouldn't try to fly a plane that I've never flown before at night. You can check the POH and everything as well for how your aircraft performs. Know your best angle of climb, VXVY. Do as much homework before you go up, and also be familiar with the airplane, know where things are, and fly it in the day a few times. So on top of knowing your airplane, definitely want to utilize a heading bug if it's installed in the airplane. Set it to the runway heading so you know where to kind of keep yourself aligned, because once you get up in the air and you're kind of pointing up towards the sky, it's going to look a little different the first couple times. You're not going to have as many visual references as you would during daytime flight. So trust your instruments, know your best angles of climb, and follow them. If you feel like you might be climbing out a little bit too high, I know most people's initial reaction is going to be to try to get that nose down to avoid a stall. However, there is another illusion in this known as the somatogravic illusion.
Joe's favorite
word.
I
love it. I was just about to say it. It just feels good to say.
Sounds sophisticated.
Yeah, exactly. So what that somatogravic illusion is essentially so you're just kind of putting that power to full power. That rapid acceleration is going to cause you to feel like you're in more of a nose high up attitude than you actually are. So look at your instruments and correct as necessary. That's just about it. And also just kind of make sure, like we were saying earlier, make sure the area is clear of terrain and obstacles. You can do so by checking the sectional chart as well as NOTAMs. Okay. So we were talking a little bit about position lights and earlier. So Andrew already touched on scanning. So we want to use our peripheral vision, slowly scan the area, look far out into a field, or as far as you can see pretty much, and just kind of slowly bring it in using your peripheral vision. You don't want to try to focus on any points for too long, because they tend to kind of get a little fuzzy, disappear a little bit if you're like really focusing on just one spot. So position lights, excellent for spotting traffic at night.
But sometimes it's difficult to see in lighted areas. So right, if you're flying around New York, it's difficult to see because you're trying to see where the lights are at relative to all those buildings.
Right. Usually you can kind of pick up on that relative movement. But you want to be, I have a nice little couple graphics here. So you're going to have that green light on the right, red light on the left, white on the back. You're going to get a few FAA test questions on that. So it's good to kind of memorize, screenshot it, whatever you need to do.
They got great diagrams out there.
Oh,
and these are perfect ones.
So one other really big part of collision avoidance during nighttime flying is going to be to utilize ATC services such as flight following or just file an instrument flight plan if you can. So if you're flying at night, I usually would like to kind of flight following. And on top of that, I have my little ADS-B for flight just for about a nice little backup.
Good situational awareness too.
Exactly. There's nothing wrong with it. You can go ahead. Okay, clouds. One thing I hear a lot of people ask me about like night flying is how would you avoid clouds at night? So on a night where you have a nice bright full moon, you can see them a little bit more clearly. It's a little bit more obvious. But the big first step, I would say, as far as cloud avoidance at night is kind of increasing your own personal minimums. So let's say during the day, you say, I'm not going to go up unless there's a 3,000-foot ceiling. You might want to start upping that to 4,000 or 5,000 feet, I'd say. Make sure you stay well clear of them. They are tougher to spot at night. And be extremely conservative with your pre-flight planning. Get a really thorough weather briefing. Look for areas where the temperature and dew point might be converging a little bit. That might be indicative of fog as well, which is also kind of tough to see at night. And you might want to plan your route out a little bit longer or a little bit more to kind of go around areas where you think there might be clouds. But one big thing you can also look for with clouds at night, if you're looking at like a city area, you might see dimming lights, you might see flashing lights that were once perfectly still.
And now
getting blocked by something.
Yep. Could be a cloud.
Exactly.
Big fluffy cloud.
Yeah. So now the big question, what do you do if you enter a cloud inadvertently at night? Same thing you would do during the day. Just do a nice big 180-degree turn to where you know there are no clouds. That's going to be your safest bet, especially if you don't know how far down that cloud goes or what is below that cloud, because things are going to be a lot harder to see at night.
And that also goes with your pre-flight planning, right? What obstacles are along our route?
Exactly.
If I want to descend to get out of the clouds, how low can I descend? Can I even descend?
Yeah, but in any case, I'd say the best option, just go where you know for a fact there are no clouds.
180 turn, right back out. Figure another way around. And like Joe said, you want to maybe plan your flight longer. We want to make sure we're having those minimum fuel requirements of 45 minutes after our destination airport. So maybe it's always good to take off full tanks. Always have more fuel with you in case weather like this pops up. Be prepared for the unexpected.
Yeah, more or less. Right. Oh, yeah. Crossing bodies of water. So, crossing bodies of water during the daytime can already be stressful enough, especially when it seems like it goes on forever. Like over in the right-hand corner, I have a little snippet from the sectional of Cape May over towards like Georgetown, that nice gap over there. So if you're especially at night, know your glide distances, consult your POHs. I have a nice little picture here of the Cessna POH. I'm sorry for my friends with the Pipers. So just remember that this is based on a zero wind scenario. So if you do catch a little bit more of a headwind and you're halfway through and your engine dies and you're at 4,000 feet, might be kind of a little closer than. So on top of knowing your glide distances and having an appropriate altitude picked out for crossing that body of water, try to know where the land is. It sounds simple enough, but if you're in a situation where you go into a cloud and you panic, you can lose your situational awareness pretty quick. Use your heading bug, use GPS, maps, whatever you have available to you.
And rely on those instruments.
Absolutely. So especially like on a moonless night, where everything is just dark. Lights can get reflected off of that water, and you might think you're flying kind of right at the coast, where the coast might be back a little bit farther than you think it would be. So it kind of blends in there with the water. So on top of mitigating that risk, you also want to kind of plan your route conservatively. Try not to go over that big body of water any longer than you need to, even if you have to kind of hug the coast a little bit, especially if you had an emergency situation. You want to be close to land.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
One thing I also want to point out on here is this is kind of down near Delaware Bay. So at nighttime, sometimes I know down here they have like the Cape May Lighthouse. If we look, there's a little dot there. That could also be another good point at nighttime to know where you are. They do have lighthouses along the bay, these little dots right here. I'm not too sure if they're lighted or not, but if you see lights like that or bigger ships or anything, try not to get them mixed up with lands because sometimes they look pretty big and it looks almost like it could be an island or anything else. So just be aware of that.
All right. So we crossed the ocean. We made it past the clouds.
Time to land.
Yep. Time to. No, before we can land, we have to find the airport.
Yes.
That's the big thing. So on your sectional chart, you can start by just looking at the little star above the airport. We realize it has a rotating beacon. And also in the chart supplement, if you look at the bottom left picture, you can see the runway, and then there's that little star on top of the buildings. So that's where the beacon is going to be located on the airport. So knowing where that is going to be super helpful for finding the airport. And on top of that, there are different beacons for different airports, essentially. So for Princeton, we have that little orange thing spinning on top of our building.
Probably right above us.
Yeah. Flashes green and then white. And that's how you know it's a civilian airport. If it was a military airport, you would see a green light followed by the white flashes, 2 white flashes. For a heliport, you have a green, white, and yellow. And I know it's important that I mention that yellow light is not coming out of the top. It is all in succession. So you see white, then yellow and green. And then water airports, you would see yellow and white. So once you find that beacon, or you think you found the beacon for the airport, you can turn on the runway lights at the airport with your radio, usually. So, like at some airports, like Charlie's and Bravos, they usually just kind of leave it on, or they'll control it for you. Deltas, sometimes they close after certain hours, and they turn into a class Echo. So then the lighting's back on you.
And you got to turn it back on with your mic.
Yes. So essentially, anytime you see a star next to the L that's in the sectional chart, go into the chart supplement and just read it over. 9 times out of 10, they're going to just tell you, light is activated on the CTAF frequency. 3 clicks for low intensity, 5 clicks for medium, 7 for high. But in certain cases like Princeton, our runway lighting is not located on our CTAF frequency. We have frequency 123.05. Yeah, right over here. So it's important to kind of do that homework ahead of time and learn where the lighting frequency is, because I hear every time I go on a night flight, I hear at least one person clicking frantically on our CTAF before we come on. We're like, okay, buddy, it's this frequency.
You gotta switch it up.
Yeah, don't assume it's just going to be on the CTAF.
And it may be a good practice just to put that, since it's on a different frequency, maybe in comms 2. This way, all you have to do is tap over to comms 2. You can turn it back on, go back over to comms 1, and you're back on Princeton. Right, and swapping the frequencies. It's up to personal preference, but I always like to put it in comms 2 if I'm able. And so I just swap it over 5 times, bam, right back.
Yep. So you want to be looking for that beacon in the dark field. Once you tap that button a couple times, you should see the lights come on. It should kind of get your attention. Um, and also be aware that there could be highways nearby that kind of give off that illusion of a runway. And we actually have some slides on that as well.
Yep.
If you want to click over. So with the ground lighting, really easy to kind of mistake a roadway for a runway. So you want to kind of get to know the different colors of like a runway light or the runway lights, which we also have a slide on. You can actually go ahead and just.
Yep.
So I'm not going to go through each color here, but mostly you're going to see white and yellow on the runway edges. You'll see that green bar over here to indicate the start of the threshold, usually red at the other end. The taxiway lights are going to be blue, so please don't land on the blue. Okay, and you got your PAPI lights right here. PAPIs or VASIs are usually also, if you want to go back one slide, or two slides. There it is. So PAPIs and VASIs, we use them for landing. They are usually circled with a P to show you where they are on the airport. So you know where to look for it, at least, if you're on a final approach. You can go back over. Okay. And
one thing with this, you'll see this runway is lit up almost like a Christmas tree. You probably spot it from pretty far away.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes.
And not every airport is going to have that center line as well.
Yes. It's nice when you got the center line light.
Yep. So now we get to play our favorite game. Find the airport.
Can anyone find out where the airport's at?
So just to show you kind of how easy it is to get a little bit turned around with trying to find an airport at night. Those lights really can kind of mess with you. Okay.
So this is one picture where, there's runways right here. There's some taxiways around. But you see how dark it looks, and you can't really see much. You can kind of see where all the gates are at, but you see it's pretty dark, so you may not know what's out there. There's highways nearby. You could mistake that for a runway or anything else.
Oh boy, show them your picture.
So this one has a different illusion. So this is Philadelphia International Airport right here. And what's this big black line going around here? It's actually the Delaware River. So the river is lined up right here, and you can see it's all dark there. And you're looking for our runways. It almost looks like the river combines right here, but this is actually the runways at Philadelphia International. So this is a great example of how the illusions mess with you, how it looks, right? You may not know that there's a runway right there. So we want to be aware of finding these airports. Bigger airports like these are actually a little easier to find because their lighting systems are much more advanced than smaller places. Sometimes you'll go to these smaller airports and you'll turn on the lights and it almost look like a parking lot, like it won't even look like an airport. So we want to do some study and be aware of what lighting everything has.
Also, I'm sorry, we had a couple questions that we
what we get?
Let's see. We can answer them at the end.
Yeah, we'll go through them at the end.
We're almost done.
Yeah. So yeah, just want to be aware with those illusions, right? It's difficult to see that airport.
Okay. So once you get to the actual airport, you found it and you're getting on heading. More or less, you do want to kind of fly the same traffic pattern you normally fly. You don't want to start changing too much up or trying to fly it extra high or so one thing I really like to do when I enter the pattern is to recycle the lights, just turn them back on. So if you were looking for the airport 15 miles out and you're clicking the lights and then you get task saturated, these lights run on a timer. So they can definitely go off on you while you're on final approach, which isn't usually the best night. No.
You got all your lights, and that could also be like if you're following the PAPI down, right? All of a sudden that goes away.
Right. So more or less, try to fly the same traffic pattern, fly the same altitude. You know, especially at an airport that you know, like Princeton, you know that those altitudes are going to kind of keep you obstruction free as long as you're not like going way out to the east or west or somewhere at 1,200 feet.
Because there's a lot of mountains around here and towers we want to be aware about.
Right. But for the most part, when you're flying the traffic pattern, you really do want to kind of utilize that heading indicator or your magnetic compass for runway orientation. As you can see at this picture I got over here, it is a picture of Capital City Airport. You could see the runways 1, 2, and runway 8. They're pretty close together. So if you were taking off on runway 1, 2, and ATC starts telling you we got traffic around here, and you're trying to avoid the big mountains that are south of the airport and pretty close to the airport, you can get a little disoriented pretty quick, especially when you're just like looking for the lights, and you can end up lining up on the wrong runway, which ATC will not be thrilled about. So just try to make sure you're lining up each turn of the pattern 90 degrees, and just try to not land on the wrong runway.
Especially with these close runways, it's hard. I know Reading is another one, and they have a mountain too, so it's another illusion with these 2 runways. Just a few more hazards. Another thing I want to point out on this picture, we see where it says HS2, HS1, HS3. These are hotspots. These are essentially where there's been a lot of traffic congestions where other aircraft could have hit each other. So we want to be aware when taxiing through these spots, especially at night, because that could be why one of those are there. So we want to be aware taxiing through these, what they call hot spots, making sure we're all clear from any other aircraft.
Oh, you broke it.
No, is it going? I clicked on.
Okay, so
Sorry.
no,
That's it. There you go.
Okay, so once you're flying your approach, you really want to just try to fly kind of a normal, stabilized approach. I know I usually we were talking about this last night. I usually like to come in a little bit on the higher side.
Yes.
But you really want to utilize the PAPI and VASI lights. Like for the PAPIs, you might want it to that just on the cusp where it's about to turn red on the top. If you have an airplane that's equipped for it, you could always load in an instrument approach and just try to follow the vertical guidance in for extra occurrence. Yep. Just don't be afraid to ask your CFI to show you how to do it. And we'll be happy to show you how to work those 430s. So the round out and the flare, whichever phrase you prefer for it. So it feels a little bit different than normal. One tip I've been seeing a lot of is try to kind of wait until you're seeing the tire marks on the runway. In that bottom picture there, you can kind of see how the tire marks are illuminated by the landing light. And then start your round out and just do a normal landing. Also, definitely be ready for wildlife. I've seen tons of deer at Princeton, especially if you're going to like a rural area like Flying W or South Jersey Regional. They are like heavily wooded, and the deer
they'll pop right out.
Yeah,
and foxes or anything, not just deer.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt to just do a low approach to the airport and try to scare them off a little bit, especially if you're unsure if there's anything on the runway. Most importantly, just always be ready to go around. If something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. Never hurts to go around.
Everyone talks about time you didn't go around. Every time you did.
Exactly. All right. Okay. So yeah, we started talking about the PAPI and VASI a little bit. Just wanted to give you guys, anybody that doesn't know or isn't familiar with it, kind of a visual on it. So I don't need to spend too long on that.
Go ahead.
I think
I know what me and Joe were talking about. We're a little high. If we do have 4, I like to keep it right about in this. We have 3 white, 1 red, because I'm just a little above. And if I'm going to this airport in a 172, I most likely have a lot more runway than I need. So it doesn't hurt to stay higher.
All right. Everyone's favorite topic, emergencies. So much to talk about in such a little time. So we talked a little bit about tomato flames plus flaps earlier today. So an electrical failure during the day might not necessarily be an emergency situation. Stinks, but at night, a source of electrical power is required. So things get a little bit stickier.
We don't have the rest of our flaps without that source.
Right.
Or avionics or anything like that. Only a limited supply, a limited amount of time with them.
Right. So, one thing you really want to do if you suspect an electrical failure, if you notice it, try to conserve as much battery power as you can. Turn off any unnecessary electrical equipment. And it doesn't hurt to purchase one of these little handheld radios.
I don't know, it's popping up.
Oh, man.
Just that way, there you go.
I brought props. No. Doesn't hurt to have a handheld radio for your night flights, especially. Just in case you did lose your radios, you wouldn't be able to turn on the runway lights, you wouldn't be able to talk to ATC, and you wouldn't be illuminated as you fly around. Your position lights wouldn't be working. So it's already just a very bad situation, but just getting that handheld radio might make it just a little bit easier to manage. Still not the best day, but
You always got backups.
exactly. So as far as just a general engine failure, those are a little bit dicier with nighttime, of course. So part of that is going to be your route planning. I like to kind of put a lot of airports on my routes for nighttime flying, especially. Try to plan around airports that have services. You can tell that on the sectional charts, the airports that have the little tick marks around them.
Yep. Or always read the notes too in the chart supplement.
Right.
Right. If you're flying to an airport or anything, you always want to read the remarks. What's going on at this airport? What do they have here?
Yeah. And granted, I mean, this is usually we have an airport every 50 feet.
We do, except for when you go down to Pine Lands a little bit.
Yes. But it's pretty easy to load your route up with airports without reading up on each one.
Yes.
So I just want to kind of go through it quick. So as with a daytime emergency, best course of action, try to stay calm, try to find a place to land, squawk 77. If you're already talking to an ATC facility, try to stay with them unless they hand you off. And as far as finding a place to land, I've noticed there's definitely a little bit of a divide among
where people would choose to land essentially at night.
Right.
There's many different factors playing into that.
Right. So I was watching a couple of YouTube videos, and I know one guy was saying, I would like to land on a road. It's going to be your safest bet. And then another guy was saying, no, you want to land in the dark areas, near lights. And it's kind of either way.
It's either way, it's decision.
Yeah, it's going to depend on where you are too. If you're at a road where there's minimum obstructions on the road, like wires or bridges, and you can make that, it might be your best option. Especially if you know the area. So another guy brought up a really good point where he was saying, if you land it in just a regular dark area, what if you don't know what it is until the end? It could be a park, and there could be people there, especially now that it's getting darker earlier. So you might make the landing, but you might end up hurting somebody in the process, which isn't what we want. So it is a bit of a tough decision.
But it's kind of more of a judgment call if it ever happens.
Right.
The one most important thing, though, with emergencies is before squawking, before calling anyone, before doing anything, the number one thing you need to do is fly the plane, right? You don't want to get so into like tuning in the radios, tune in this. It is important, but your number one priority is to fly the plane.
Absolutely.
That's the most important thing, right? Because that's how you're going to get on the ground. Fly the plane. Okay.
Next slide. Yeah, just the same general stuff we were just saying. Just maintaining positive control. Check for any sort of malfunctions that might be fixable, such as just fuel tank being on the wrong tank or anything like that. Communicate and find a landing area, preferably close to a public access area. you don't want to. I mean, it's tough in like the Pine Barrens because there's a big stretch of land where it's kind of just barren.
Trees.
All right, and then I pretty much said it all in the last slide. All right, and we also talked a little bit about some scenario-based kind of.
So we want to do scenario-based training. We want you guys to try to figure it out too. Don't be afraid to turn off your mute and answer. So
here we go.
All right. So the first thing, we'll talk about plane lighting. So we kind of talked about this a little bit before, so we'll review this again. So if I'm going to take off at night, and let's say it's my own plane, and I'm doing my pre-flight, and now I'm seeing that that my beacon light is out. Am I legal to fly?
That's such a loaded question. I heard a no.
Oh, no? So you're correct. We can't fly, right?
Okay.
Our anti-collision light, our beacon is our main one. We're not able to fly.
Okay. So now another question with that. It is 5:00 p.m. on, let's say today. 5:00 p.m. You want to do a cross-country out to Reading and back. You notice that your red nav light is out. Can you make the flight to and from Reading?
So give or take, that's about 2 hours of time. What time is sunset?
That would be
About 6 o'clock.
just the to, not the from.
Yeah.
Yep. So we may not be legal to fly back. So we want to be aware, make sure, even if you're going during the day, even if, let's say, I'm flying to Reading and it's 12 o'clock during the day, I'm going to be all there all day with family, but now I'm going to fly back at night. So we want to be aware, is everything working, even when you're doing that day pre-flight, because you don't know if you're going to be flying back. So we want to be aware of this even when we do this during the day. Can't take question B.
All right. So we started talking a little bit about like some of the, we saw a couple airports where like the beacons are really close together.
Yes. So when we talked about those beacon light earlier, there are some airports that are very close to each other. And a good example of this is going to be, where are they at? Wait for it to load up. Flying W and South Jersey Regional, right? Both of these airports are very close to each other. So if I'm flying here at night, you could mistake one for the other. So it's important that we kind of see which way we're going and make sure we have the right beacon when we're flying to these airports, right?
Yep. I think they're actually both on the same CTAF frequency as well.
Let's see.
And they use the same lighting frequency. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, they're both on the same CTAF too. So
that's a matter of just kind of using your heading indicator as well to make sure you're lined up for the right runway and making sure the lights are headed in the right direction.
Yep. Because if you're turning on both these airports light, right, say, oh, there's the airport there, but you could be going to the wrong one.
So just every part of risk mitigation with nighttime flying is just going to be on the ground.
Yes. You're doing your pre-flight planning, looking over everything, making sure that you know what's along your route. You're preparing yourself to understand where are we going, what's around us, overall situational awareness. That's the most important thing when you're flying during the night.
All right.
See this.
And I guess we can take some of those questions while we're at it.
Yep. So we can take a look here.
Yeah.
Pull them up. So let's go. So first one is the attitude indicator not required for VFR night flying. Right? It isn't. We don't need it at night. But it is a good tool to aid with us to counteract these false horizons or any of these other illusions, right? We can help. So if that can help us identify, are we encountering this illusion if we trust our instruments? Right.
Anything else? You're welcome, Bia.
45 minutes.
And if you sustain, 45 minutes left once you are.
So, I'll shoot you.
Yeah, so 45 minutes at a normal cruise. Yeah, so you want to have a good 45 minutes after your destination set to a cruise setting.
Right. We do our calculations to our topic climb. We see how much fuel we burn when we do our cross-country flight planning. So doing that, we're all adding that fuel in with our climb, with our cruise, and also our descent, right? We're adding all this fuel time in. So we want to make sure we have those legal requirements of 45. And if we have a destination, it has to be 45 minutes after, if we have an alternate, we want to have 45 minutes after we go to alternate. So, right, those charts in the POH are there to help you to plan for how much fuel we need and all of that. All right. How do you deal with, or what are good practice habits for learning how to judge height above the runway at night? Oh, that's a good one.
Well, I mean, I guess first is going to be utilizing, altimeter, PAPI lights, and kind of being able to put those quickly into your scan.
Yep. You could kind of have a scan. Okay, where's my airspeed? Where's the PAPI lights at? Where am I at?
Yeah, it's one of those things that's just, I think it also takes a little bit of practice and getting used to the sight picture.
Practice makes perfect.
And okay, so now it's the real question. And of course it's Alex. All right, real question. Engine out at night, black hole or lighted roadways? So we kind of touched on that a little bit.
So right, you want to see, it's kind of a judgment call of where to go. If I study the area and I know, okay, I'm in the middle of Texas, I know they're all farm fields. This is most likely going to be a field. Maybe I'll go towards the black hole if I don't have any lighted roads. If I have a lighted road, I'm picking that all day, right? That's like a lighted strip to land, as long as there's no obstructions.
Yeah, and that's kind of tough to judge too at nighttime.
And it's not like you could do a short flyover. The safest thing would be not to fly. The red and green light is out, and there is a portion of flying. Right. As in other cases, won't be able to see whether you are heading towards it. Yep.
Yeah.
You may not be able to see.
Very good. What if the attitude indicator malfunctions at night?
So this is where I was talking about where we verify with our other instruments.
Yeah. So like we said, it's not like you would be breaking any reg necessarily, but it might be wiser to cut your flight early.
Because we want to have that backup flight. So if you are flying and you sense that it is failing, this is a little bit of instrument training. We verify with other instruments, right? So if we're in the right-hand bank, we're looking at our heading indicator and we're seeing our compass and everything turn, right? We're going to see if they indicate the same way that our attitude indicator is turning. And we can check our turn slip indicator. Sorry, drawing a blank on that. But the ball in the plane. And we can verify with those instruments. If we see that our attitude indicator is showing us descending or climbing, we could check our airspeed, we could check our altimeter, we could cross-verify instruments, right? We have a whole six-pack in front of us. We can see a lot of things.
You're welcome.
All
right,
so landing lights. Why is that only required? So this is a good one. I don't even know the answer to this one.
Because the FAA says
this one is the FAR aim says so. Probably because I imagine. I mean, I don't want to say this for sure, but I imagine it's probably because obviously if you're carrying past or, well, no, I guess technically not. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Not too sure.
We'll get back with a more solid answer.
We'll have to figure that out.
Make sure I write that.
Any other questions for anything?
Great job, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew and Joe.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Again, if you have any suggestions for topics to cover for the future, please let us know. This was great. And if you have any questions moving forward, feel free to stop in. This will be recorded and posted on our YouTube channel, so you'll be able to watch it back, and as well as the slides will be posted, so you can go back and click through those at a later time.
Have a good night, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks again.
Bye, guys. Take care.